I think one of the most traumatizing words that we can say to ourselves is that'll never happen to me, right? I mean, life has a funny way of proving us wrong. But I don't think anybody wakes up or one day saying, I want to be homeless, or I want to live in a cardboard box, or I want to overdose on fentanyl or anything like that. I don't believe anybody, wants that. Early, addictive behavior and substance abuse can be very life altering. And to me, it was 29 years of substance abuse.
All right, Eric, so this is just kind of just real talk for interviewing you, getting your story out there, helping people understand, helping youth understand that getting involved in drug culture is just not worth it. From a personal testimony, from a personal story that you've come through so much, and then realizing that at the end of it, there wasn't any payoff. There wasn't anything worth it. Tell me a little bit about that in your story, and how you tell me a little bit about how you started down that road.
Yeah, so right into it, right? My name is Eric. I grew up in Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. I was the youngest sibling, so I had older brothers and other sisters. My mom, she had a in-home daycare in her house. So we had a lot of friends. We grew up in a community. We loved sports, vacationing, going to the pool, visiting family. So Thanksgiving was big, Christmas was big, so we were a family-oriented home. And but even though I'm taking you back, I want to fast forward a little bit to in that story. In 1981, our family was visiting my mom's parents in Thomasville, North Carolina. And on a Sunday afternoon, we were traveling back to our hometown, Durham. Nothing could prepare us for that day when we were traveling back and what was going to happen. But we were coming down Highway 54. This was before a lot of the interstates were built. And on the other side of the hill was a gentleman passing in a no passing zone, doing about 80 miles an hour. He was intoxicated, and we were traveling on the other side of the hill coming up. So you can imagine what happened at the top of that hill, head-on collision. The other driver of that car was killed instantly. I was sitting in the front seat. I had broke my jaw, my arm, 3 fingers, had about 90 stitches in my head. My mom, she wasn't so lucky. She would go through the floor of the van. She would crush every bone from her hip down and both her legs. She had to have metal rods installed to help her walk. She would spend 2 years in a hospital bed and then another year in rehab. My dad, he was mildly injured, but at that time it triggered Parkinson's disease. And back then they didn't have a lot of research for it. So my dad, he would come, a little violent, a little abusive in the home. And ultimately 5 years later, my parents, they had their own reasons, why, but they would separate and ultimately divorce. I was at age 13 at that time. That's when I, started experimenting with marijuana and alcohol, and, something I thought that was not such a big deal at the time, kind of led me into, nicotine and tobacco. And then here I was off into these addictive behaviors and patterns, not really knowing and understanding what I was doing. I could quit whenever I wanted to, not that big of a deal. Come to find out, at the time I was 15, I was selling cocaine and using cocaine, breaking into cars. I would rip and run the streets at all hours of the night. By the time I was 16, I'd get my license, and a week later after that, I would get a DUI, and I would lose my license, my sophomore year. So here I was kind of limping my way into my junior and senior year, losing all focus of what meant the most to me, family and sports and friends. And by the time I was in senior in high school, drugs, had me in a chokehold completely. And I was a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school. I want to fast forward to 2004, but in between that time, I was in and out of jail. I was always running from my addictions. I was always, kind of ashamed, embarrassed, and, going from town to town. But in 2004, I was arrested for possession, attempt to sell, maintaining, dwelling, and trafficking crack cocaine. And I would serve 14 months, locked up, and then into a release program. That's where, I had to, that was my sentencing at the time. So after I was kind of complied with everything with that, I was right back into the world, kind of went right back to what I knew. I'll fast forward all the way to 2018. I was living in Greenville, South Carolina. This particular afternoon, I would be right back at my same destructive lifestyle and using and things like that. And fentanyl, which was, a highly synthetic opioid, that's what a lot of people are overdosing on now in our country, was mixed into my drugs, not knowingly. I used it. 15 minutes later, there I was laying in a room, overdosed. Luckily, individual had seen me in the room at the time. They couldn't get me revived, no heartbeat, no pulse, done turned purple, face, hands. It took about 15 minutes for the law enforcement, first responders to get there. They had hit me with Narcan twice. That is a opioid reversal, of the known name is naloxone. So I would go to the Greenville, South Carolina hospital there, and I think it was 3 to 5 days later, they would release me. I didn't have insurance. I wasn't a priority. They got me stable. So there I was out of an emergency room, broke, busted, disgusted, the clothes on my back, no driver's license, hungry, no one there to meet me or greet me or pick me up, just devastated, and that was kind of just the worst feeling in the world. Here I was, in a town I wasn't from, overdosed on fentanyl, in a parking lot with nowhere to go. So that's, kind of where I felt like, obviously, most people would agree, I needed a major life change.
Mm-hmm. Just to go back a little bit and talking about growing up in the family situation, things like that, when you first started experimenting with drugs, using drugs and things like that, did anybody in your family know?
So I'm going to say no. I was the youngest. I always hung around with the oldest crowd. My family has no past history of any substance abuse, whether it be alcohol or drugs. None of my sisters and brothers, really used or had issues with it. I'm going to say no. My mom was a single parent, working 2 jobs, trying to make ends meet. My siblings were off to college and school. Always had, hung out with the older crew and older crowd, and so, I fell into kind of the, what was cool, fitting in, peer pressure. That was that mentality. It wasn't really anything. It wasn't my circumstances, it was always my choices. It was always, what I thought was cool or what was the cool thing to do, and not knowing and not being educated on what that lifestyle was and what those effects could have on me, all the way up to today, today's time.
Right. And I think it's important to realize, like you said, that you are not the victim of circumstance, but that you are the outcome of choice, because there's always a choice in the matter. And I had a question about, did drugs find you or did you go looking for them initially?
Yeah, so back then, unlike it is today, where it's no shortage of finding a drink on every corner or drugs and alcohol and paraphernalia in stores and stuff like that. Back when I grew up, it was pretty accessible too. There was no shortage of it. I mean, especially when you're talking about marijuana and cocaine and crack cocaine, where today now we've evolved, into the opioids and heroin and meth and synthetics and on and on and on. So what back then I thought was kind of an experimental stage, is not that way now. It's not. Now it's kind of, don't use drugs, get clean and sober, or it could be fatal. So we don't know what's in it now. They're mixed with so many different things.
Mm-hmm. And this is to back up just a little bit, when you're mentioning about overdosing on fentanyl, that you said you were unbeknownst to you.
Yeah, so I knew what fentanyl was. I knew that since my drug of choice was not so much opioids, that we were, drug dealers. They're not really chemists or anything like that. They obviously, if they can get fentanyl cheaper, they're going to mix it in there to give a more higher potency. My drug of choice was different. So when I used, not knowing that fentanyl was in there, how devastating to overdose on something that wasn't really your drug of choice. That's something that I would never want to experience again. The fact of waking up to knowing that you were dead and that you had to be revived. And then you've got EMS and you've got police officers and you got all these lights in your face and you got people, IVs running in your arms and you're soaking wet for whatever reason that you're soaking wet for. And that, you're shoved in the back of an ambulance. You have no clue what's going on. I mean, that's not an experience I'd ever want to experience again in my entire life. That was pretty devastating. It was that point of no return for my life. It was that point that I needed a major life change.
Because like you said, you were literally dead at that point.
Yeah, for right at 15 minutes. Most people don't come back from this or they're struggling with some type of brain issues.
And how old were you when that happened?
I was 45. 45 years of age. Mm-hmm. Dating back all the way to when I was 13 years of age, when I thought that something as innocently as maybe I thought at the time of smoking a cigarette, chewing tobacco, taking a drink, puffing on some marijuana, I had no clue.
Most people don't wake up one morning and decide to overdose on fentanyl, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I never wanted to be an addict. I never wanted to be somebody that, I think one of the most traumatizing words that we can say to ourselves is that'll never happen to me, right? I mean, life has a funny way of proving us wrong. But I don't think anybody wakes up or one day saying, I want to be homeless or I want to live in a cardboard box or I want to overdose on fentanyl or anything like that. I don't believe anybody, wants that. But the truth and reality is that you develop those addictive behaviors, something you think is so innocent now, like the vaping being so popular, the liquid THC, what it does to the adolescent brain that develops them, early, addictive behavior and substance abuse can be very life altering. And to me, it was 29 years of substance abuse.
Looking back over that entire history over 29 years of substance and drug abuse, what does that feel like now today, looking back on it?
It's like breaking every heart that you've ever touched. I have a son and I couldn't even look my own son in his eyes. I could see the hurt and the pain, but it still, couldn't get me to get clean and sober. It's like being hungry and you have the money to buy some food, but you go buy drugs anyways. It's like being able to hang on to any job you ever had, getting a paycheck on Friday, and then Saturday morning, you're broke. It's like actually telling the truth to somebody, but they think you're lying anyways because you've lied over and over and over. It's like being invited to a birthday party or Christmas or Thanksgiving and never showing up. It's like not put your clothes don't fit no more because you've lost so much weight because all you do is drugs all the time. I mean, that's about as raw as I can be with it. It's just that spiral staircase that just continues to go down and down. There's no bottom,
During that time, throughout that history, were there any moments of clarity, I guess you'd say, where you were afraid of what came next?
Yeah. So one thing I left out was like, substance abuse was like committing suicide every single day on the installment plan. It was like, you didn't want to die, but you didn't, you were willing to risk taking one more hit, one more blow, and you were willing to accept those consequences. So, for me, that lifestyle right there, the circumstances behind that just didn't matter, man. It was like a hostage of the brain. It was like, it wasn't a bad person. I didn't grow up that way. I wasn't taught that way. My closest friends, that wasn't their path. It was my choice after choice that continued me down that destructive pathway. Mm-hmm. And I just didn't know how to raise my hand and say, I need help. I was too embarrassed and too ashamed. Mm-hmm.
And what is it that helped you to get to that point where you said, I do need help? And what is it that brought you to that breaking point to where there was effective change?
I did have some few people in my life that never gave up on me, that continued to pray for me. My mom being one, another close friend of mine, that they just never gave up on me, And, when I limped my way back home from Greenville, South Carolina, I had a few people reach out to me and say that, look, we know you're in this spot, you're in a bad spot, but we're here for you. and then connecting with a peer support person, somebody I could talk to about my lifestyle that can kind of see through all the madness and not have their emotions caught up in it, that they can relate to my path. It would be difficult for me to go talk to maybe a pastor or a teacher or a mentor that's not gone down that path because they maybe can't relate to it. And that's when I kind of started marking, baseball stitches, on a baseball. And that's how that kind of got started, the whole 108 challenge concept. I didn't think that recovery was ever about following the path of somebody else. I always thought about recovery for me being something that best fits me and how I can work my recovery one day at a time.
Because you're a unique individual, right? You have a unique circumstance, and trying to shove somebody into a box that already feels, like you said, alienated and outcast, like that's going to be pretty tough for them because it's not going to be applicable, right?
Yeah. So, I don't really discriminate or judge how anybody finds recovery. I think there's all different models out there that can be effective. I just felt like that, for me personally, it was better for me to connect. I feel that recovery is about connection. I think it's about building you a network of people around you, where accountability sometimes is missed in recovery, integrity, sometimes the little things in recovery that you have to do every day to remind yourself not to go back to those destructive lifestyle. That's important.
And then to take that experience, like you said, that you would never want to repeat that. You wouldn't wish that on anybody. What was it like getting into recovery and meeting someone else that had a similar experience with fentanyl, that was walking a similar path to you, that now has realized I have to make a change. I have to change.
Yeah, so peer support is very vital and very key to me. One that we can talk through our struggles, whether it's a movie that's on, running into an old acquaintance, whether it's kind of feeling isolated and bored like a lot of us are in the country right now. Whether it's that stinking thinking, I call it, that creeps back into my mind. As I look back on it, I don't see that like drugs and alcohol is my biggest challenge. I was my biggest challenge. It was me. I have a saying that I tell students all the time. I look in the mirror and it's laughed at me a few times, right? But it's never lied to me. That mirror always tells me the truth, no matter what. But being able to connect with somebody that's gone down a similar path is vitally key to me in recovery, that you can talk through some of them things that you're struggling with when you start feeling the walls close in and getting bored and things like that.
If you could, what would you say to your younger self when you first started getting into drug abuse and things like that?
Wow, man, if I could go back to the younger self. One would be slow down. We live in such a fast paced, got to have it now mentality world, right? I mean, growing up, man, I knew what was cool, what was hot, what was hip, what was not. But, I didn't have the first clue about addiction and substance abuse and prioritizing things in my life, goal setting, respecting my teachers. Teachers is a huge thing. I think that a lot of times if we're a student or a middle school or high school or even a college student, we may be going through something personal in our life. We may be struggling with our homework. We may be struggling to fit in with different groups or people. And we don't talk about it. I think that, it's one of the mentalities, like, you don't know, raise your hand and ask. It's one of them things to raise your hand. I need help. I'm struggling with this. I need help. I need somebody to surround me. I need people around me that can, be positive, that can push me in the right direction, that help me with my goal setting, my career, and, what my measurement of success is and how I can perform in life. I think that's huge. If I could really go back, it would be to reach out and talk to people about things that you're struggling with.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on it a little bit. You mentioned the measurement of success. How do you teach somebody to understand what that means to measure success?
To me, it's impacting another life. It's encouraging somebody. It's educating them. informing them. It's giving them fact-based information on whatever that is. You know, I I don't think there's anything wrong with somebody wanting to live in a big house and having, the real nice cars and the big bank account. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But that was never my measurement of success. I mean, my measurement of success always meant connection. My measurement of success always meant networking and putting myself around people that can help me go places in my life. Surround myself with that group, man, that can, give me wisdom and knowledge. So whatever your measurement of success is, or whatever that might be, I would say to the youth, have the courage to find out what that is and build your entire life around it. And don't let nobody tell you can't do it. Mm-hmm. Shoot for your dreams, man. Go for it.
Mm-hmm. And that, all things that are building and surrounding to why you developed the 108 Challenge. And so tell me a little bit about the 108 Challenge, how that came about.
Well, as you can see behind me, I have some trophies, but this is my sixth baseball, right? So I'm well over 600 days in this new life. And so the 108 Challenge, I wasn't the best athlete growing up. I competed in anything. I didn't care what it was. I wanted to beat you in everything. I was just really headstrong that I was better than you. But not so much the case. But baseball was something that was huge, especially with me and some of my closest friends. And, when I thought about recovery and how that mindset of one day at a time and this tool, never created it for anybody else. I only created it for myself. And, I looked at these stitches on this ball and I realized, man, these stitches, they have a job. They have a job to hold this baseball together. No matter how hard that person swings and that bat hits this ball, it's got to hold this thing together, not shatter it. And, so I thought, okay, wow, how many stitches are on this? I didn't even know, right? So I had to Google it, found out it was 108 stitches. And so anyways, I felt like recovery was the same way, that no matter, or even life challenges or adversity we face, it don't even have to be recovery. It's just like going through our life, growing up, learning, just life in general, no matter how life, hits me, no matter how hard I'm challenged with things. I can resonate with this. This is something visual. I can see concrete in the palm of my hand and mark every single day. It's a reminder of how I can get up and face my day no matter what. And I thought this would be a great tool for people, that if you're serious about your recovery or a life change, if you're serious about taking a stand of challenging misconceptions about drugs and alcohol, living a drug-free life, that this is a great reminder. It's a great tool every single day, that no matter how hard life hits, man, one day at a time, we take that approach, we can have a successful life. So that kind of birthed the 108 Challenge, man. That was kind of the concept behind it, and bang, here we are,
That's awesome. And tell me, what's the mission of the 108 Challenge? What's your goal?
4 years ago, man, we had 70,000+ people die of overdose. And we start looking at that age range, man. You start looking at, kids getting younger and younger. It's seeping into our, middle schools and high schools and things like that. And I got to thinking about me and how I got started. So now the 108 Challenge has kind of evolved to the 108 Challenge Drug Prevention Education. I mean, our goals is to impact the youth. It's to give them fact-based information, so they can at least make an informed decision and be understanding of their consequences when they make them. We glamorize, alcohol, now the vaping and the liquid THC and the new marijuana movement. We're telling our youth, that it's okay. We're telling them it's okay to use and this, that, and the other, but nobody tells them the other side of the equation. They don't tell them about the life challenges, the health issues that you may have, your career, all the devastating effects they can have on it. So we want to make sure that at least they have the other side of the equation and they're informed about it.
Right. Because it's one thing to tell a person a statistic. It is another thing to show a person this is what life looks like on the other side of this, and to show it from somebody, even from a personal anecdote, from somebody who is similar to them in age or class. And that's the other thing, is the drug abuse transcends every socioeconomic layer there is.
Correct. So this thing has no race. It has no color. It doesn't care what side of tracks you grew up on. It doesn't care if you lived in a small home, big home, what kind of car mommy and daddy drives, who's got the coolest cell phone, who's the coolest, who's the most talented, this football star, the best. It doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate. I mean, we're all one decision away from things going terribly wrong in our life. I mean, we need to our parents need to tell their kids, they need to have this role play stuff. If you're faced with, hey, take a toke off this vaping device, or hey, try this pill, or here's this solo cup, man, they need to know what to say. They already need to know and be informed about it.
As far as the 108 challenge is concerned, kind of give me the nuts and bolts of what that looks like as far as the program is concerned, like coming into schools and.
Sure. So obviously, as school reaches out to us, we target schools ourselves, whether it be a city school, county school, charter school, private school, day schools. It doesn't matter to us. If it's a local school, we're a free service. We don't charge anything. Obviously, if we have to travel or fly or stay in hotels, then that's a little different. We have those conversations with them. But when they get the 108 challenge, they get myself and a 90-minute PowerPoint presentation. It can be shorter if need be, on whatever the trending topics there at the school. So if it's, obviously now the big thing is vaping and the THC and the high concentrates with that. Obviously pain meds and opioids have always, is a topic of discussion. If it's meth, whatever that is, you see these posters, we do them all. And like I said, we partner with the number one school curriculum in the country. So they get that as well with the educator's guide. So long after we leave through our PowerPoint presentation, they continue to teach and educate the students. Pamphlets from marijuana, cocaine, meth, LSD, whatever it is they want, we give it to them and they can continue to educate them throughout the school year. We also are geared up to come in and do the faculty in the afternoon after we do the students. That way they can kind of hear a very similar message so they're on the same page. And we also offer a parent night. So while we're there, they can get the students educated on drug prevention education with the best curriculum in the country. And then we go and we have the same PowerPoint with the faculty. And then we have a parent night. And all those sessions, we try to leave time to open up and have open topic discussions and Q&A with the students.
Which is excellent because, like you said, that's so important, is the communication piece of it. Is so many people don't know or don't even know who to ask or what questions to ask. If you need to solve a problem but you don't know what to Google, what are you going to do?
Yeah, that's a great point. When we go in and I'll share this, that we ask the students, how many of you know somebody who vapes, or have you tried vaping before? Have you seen somebody vape, liquid THC, or have you tried it? Every student raises their hand. Whether they're telling the truth or not, it's irrelevant. But as soon as we ask them, how do those vaping devices work? What are nicotine salts? Where do they come from? Not a student knows. So I think it's very important for not only the parents, but the teachers, but obviously, our youth is our future, It's very important. I mean, the best way for us to save lives and to save money, it's proven, is prevention, is to get in there and educate them while they're young. We need to do a better job of pulling people, out of the river of substance abuse. And I'm all for that. If an adult wants to talk or somebody, I'm there. But we need to put extra or even more effort in finding out where they're falling in at and really start doing a better job in prevention.
Mm-hmm. On the preemptive side, for sure.
Absolutely.
And then question for you, you're mentioning, about the curriculum that 108 Challenge is using and leveraging, and the author's Michael De Leon, correct?
Well, he's the founder of Steered Straight, but we both use drugfreeworld.org, The Truth About Drugs. So we just share the same curriculum. But Michael De Leon, he's kind of my mentor in this whole arena. He's been at it 12 years. He's the best in the business. We went and watched. I pick his brain a lot. He's just been just so phenomenal on us and helping us.
How'd you meet him?
So yeah, not quite 2 years ago, I was invited to speak at a drug prevention summit down in Tampa, Florida, with Drug Free America, the executive director there, Amy Ronshausen. She invited us down there, and we got to go down there and share. And that's really where this 108 challenge live event kind of started from. I modeled what she did down there, kind of an in-person event. But that's where I met Michael DeLeon. That's where I met the Florida chapter of drugfreeworld.org. We have all three of those names speaking on this event, Michael DeLeon, Amy Ronhausen, and the executive director of Drug Free World as well. So I'm excited about having him and being a part. He's just been huge for my growth.
Like you said, it's important to, earlier we were talking about having mentors and talking with people. It's important to have those people in your life, regardless of how old you are and where you are in that spectrum, that understanding there's always somebody who is older and better than you, and there's always going to be somebody who's either younger or not as good at you in anything that we do in this world. There's always going to be the people ahead of us and the people behind us, and it's finding both of those people so that you can both mentor and be mentored to continue that path forward. And if people wanted to connect with you for the 108 Challenge, how would they do that? Beyond the live event, you can give those details as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the students and high school students and college students and people in recovery first. So you can go to Convene Communities. We have a website in there. You can connect with me on any platform inside that. That's Convene Communities. Just click on it and join. It's free to become a member. It's free to go into the 108 Challenge group. We're also on Facebook at the 108 Challenge #2. On Facebook. We're also on Instagram at the 108 Challenge. If you're a school superintendent or a principal or a teacher, health teacher, guidance counselor in any way, probably the best way to have that conversation would be to our email. And that's the108challenge@gmail.com. And those are all three of our social media pages and our email. And you can reach out to us anytime. We usually respond within 24 hours.